They were supposed to be gone. The Ezarethi Empire, a once mighty civilization whose spires reached beyond the event horizon of dying stars, had slipped into legend 2 centuries ago. Their technology was a marvel, blending organic matter with machines, bending gravity to their will, and manipulating space-time as easily as humans adjust a thermostat. But the empire fell, as all empires do, broken by war. A war so devastating it erased their very presence from the galaxy. Historians dubbed it the Great Silence, a cosmic void left in their wake, a mystery, a tragedy, a final, resounding echo, swallowed by the stars. But that silence wasn't absolute. At first, the message was a curiosity, a faint, nearly imperceptible signal, so weak that no one had bothered to investigate. But when the Zarnath spiral's outer rim started to pulse with an unusual frequency, even the complacent factions of the Galactic Council took notice. No one cared much about the Ezarethi Empire. Its ruins were scattered like cosmic dust. It was their tech, their art, their history that fascinated the scholars. But the Empire itself? A dead race. The Luxan Dominion scoffed at the signal, chalking it up to a solar quirk. The Rithari Collective dismissed it as interference from a nearby stellar collapse. Even the enigmatic Vigrosian League didn't bat an eye. To the rest of the galaxy, it was just static, an anomaly in the noise of the cosmos. But the message kept coming, over and over. Thinner and weaker with each passing cycle, but unmistakable. And then, they heard it. Help, before they finish us all. The message was alien, yet the meaning was clear. Desperation laced every word, an ancient species clawing at the fabric of existence itself. The plea, transmitted in 9 distinct languages, some long extinct, others never heard by human ears, rang through the deep space comms. Ezarethi. The thought flickered through many minds. Could they still be alive? Could some hidden remnant of their once grand civilization have survived the collapse? If so, how? And more importantly, why? It took only a few hours for the humans to make the connection. The Terran Republic, humanity, wasn't a galactic superpower. It wasn't the oldest race in the stars, nor the most technologically advanced. Earth's place in the Galactic Council was humble at best, often dismissed by the older, more powerful species. The Federation of Sol had a reputation for innovation, yes, but also for their propensity to stand on the sidelines of larger galactic politics. It was a reputation that had left humanity at the mercy of others for far too long. But Earth's history, one of oppression, survival, and ultimately resurgence, was something the stars could never erase. The people of Earth had always been fighters, survivors. Their story was filled with wars, revolution, and an insatiable drive to rise above the odds. When the message came, something deep within the heart of the human spirit stirred. This wasn't the first time humanity had been abandoned, dismissed, or left to the void, and this wouldn't be the first time they answered a call that no one else would. Within 72 hours, the decision was made. The Valkyrie's Vow, humanity's most advanced stealth dreadnought, was launched from Saturn's Black Ring dockyards. No fanfare, no speeches, just the faint whine of quantum thrusters powering to life as the massive ship ascended from the docking bays. The crew knew what was at stake. They knew the risks. And yet, they didn't hesitate. The mission was simple: find them, save them, or die trying. Inside the command deck of the Valkyrie's Vow, Commander Jace Thorne stood over the holotable, his sharp eyes scanning the data with quiet intensity. He wasn't like the other commanders of the Republic's fleet. He had seen too much, lost too much, to let another mission slide by without purpose. His eyes, haunted by memories of the border wars and the blackened scars of humanity's past conflicts, betrayed nothing but the cold pragmatism of a soldier who had learned to survive by trusting no one but himself and his crew. His fingers tapped lightly on the table's edge, sending ripples through the holographic display as it showed the coordinates. The Zarnath spiral, beyond known space. "This is it," he muttered. "The final frontier, and we're diving right in." Marin Solari, the mission's linguist and specialist in ancient languages, stood beside him. She had the same haunted look in her eyes. Her daughter, a lost officer in the Republic Navy, had disappeared years earlier in the same region. That was the personal reason she was here. For her, this wasn't just a mission. It was a chance for redemption, a chance to answer the question that had kept her awake at night for the better part of a decade. If they're still out there. Jace's voice trailed off, the weight of the words heavy on the air. After all this time, Marin's voice was soft but resolute, as though every word was a commitment. Then we go. We find them. We answer their call. No one else will. Suddenly the comms crackled to life, and ILA X7, the Valkyrie's Vow's AI co-pilot, spoke in its usual, monotone voice. Anomaly detected, Commander. Chronometric echoes. Something ancient. Possibly hostile. Jace turned toward the communication panel. Hostile? We haven't even left the system yet, ILA. The anomaly is not conventional, the AI replied. Space-time has shifted, in ways not recorded in any human database. We are approaching an area of interest. Meaning? Jace asked. The readings are unsettling, ILA said, before pausing for effect. Whatever this is, Commander, it's not natural. It's not something that should exist. Jace's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a mission. It was a plunge into the unknown. The very fabric of reality felt wrong here. The stars themselves seemed to flicker out of place as they entered the fringes of the Zarnith spiral. The Valkyrie's Vow moved silently through the void. Every engine whine and pulse, a subtle thrum in the silence of space. They passed nebulae in shades of violet and cobalt, uncharted moons hidden by the dying light of faraway stars. The stars here seemed distant, indifferent to their passing. And then, as if the ship had crossed some threshold, the comms lit up. Once again, this time not with a message, but with a presence. A face. No, not a face, but a pattern. Fractal in design, sprawling across every monitor on the command deck. It wasn't just projected on the screens, it felt inside them, in their minds, twisting, warping reality as they knew it. You came, the voice whispered. Not from the speakers, but inside their heads. A soft, hypnotic tone. Jace's heart skipped a beat. What is this? His breath quickened as the image twisted again. This time, a vast cosmic city flickering in the fractal pattern's wake. Marin's face was pale, her voice barely a whisper. It's calling to us. The voice repeated. You came. Marin stepped forward. It knows we're here. Jace clenched his jaw. It wants us here. The entire crew stood frozen as the presence seemed to settle over them. It was as if something ancient, something far older than any of them, had awakened. Something far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. We need to go down there, Jace finally said, his voice filled with quiet determination. Marin turned to him. Her eyes narrowed, a calm fury beneath the surface. Then let's go. Whatever it is, we face it head on. The Valkyrie's Vow surged forward into the depths of the Zarnith spiral, its stealth systems barely detectable against the backdrop of ancient cosmic chaos. The stars here, those few that still glimmered, flickered like distant beacons, almost as if they, too, were waiting for something. The black void stretched endlessly, its vastness incomprehensible, yet there was an undeniable weight to it. The Valkyrie cut through the silence with mechanical precision, yet the crew could not escape the feeling that something unseen was watching them, as if the very fabric of space itself had come alive. Commander Jace Thorne stood on the observation deck, looking out at the swirling nebulae below. He could feel the hum of the engines beneath his boots, the pulse of the ship's energy shields, but it was the unshakable tension in the air that held his attention. Something was wrong. This region of space was anomalous, its gravitational fields disrupted, space-time itself slightly warped. The stars here seemed older, some closer to the event horizon of black holes, their light dimming under the pressure of unseen forces. It's like we're sailing through a forgotten graveyard, Jace muttered to himself, though Marin Solari, standing beside him, heard every word. She glanced up, her gaze steady. A graveyard of civilizations, or something worse. Jace's lips tightened into a thin line. It had been almost 2 days since they'd left the Sol system, and the crew's nerves were fraying. The Zarnith spiral was a place of legend, home to ancient races that had disappeared before humanity even found their way into the stars. The more they ventured into this region, the more they felt the weight of an untold history pressing on them. Ancient ruins drifted by, broken ships, derelict stations, remnants of a time long gone. But they weren't alone. The voice, the presence, had not spoken since that first encounter, but its echo lingered in the minds of the crew, pressing at the edges of their consciousness like a dream that they couldn't shake. They all felt it, the quiet, disembodied whisper that seemed to bend reality itself. It had started as a subtle hum, then a pattern, and now it was like a presence in the room, thickening the air, as if the very ship was alive with it. They came. The voice whispered again, this time louder. The words drifted through the comms, as though coming from every corner of the ship, vibrating against their skulls. "It knows we're here," Marin said again, but her tone had shifted from uncertainty to something else. Something darker. This wasn't the Ezerethi they had read about in the history archives. This wasn't the echo of a dead empire. No, this felt like something that had never truly died. The crew couldn't ignore it any longer. The message had been clear. They were being called to the surface of an uncharted planet within the spiral. It wasn't a mere location, it was a destination. The coordinates came from the fragmented signal, almost as if the planet itself had been waiting, hidden in the gravity well of an ancient star, shrouded by stellar debris. Jace ordered the ship into a descent trajectory, the Valkyrie's vow aligning with the faintly glowing planet. Its surface was cloaked in shadows, streaks of silvery clouds swirling overhead as if the atmosphere itself was in a perpetual state of flux. The planet's gravity felt off, heavier than it should be, distorting the ship's flight path and pulling them in like a magnet. "I've got no choice but to land in the southern hemisphere," Jace declared, his voice hardening. "Take us down." As they approached, the landing sequence initiated, and the entire ship shifted with the vibrations of the descent. Below, through the ship's reinforced viewports, the landscape stretched out, desolate, barren plains littered with strange stone formations and jagged mountain ranges. But the most unnerving sight was the center of it all. A massive structure, towering far beyond anything humanity had built, rising like a scar from the planet's surface. The structure was not a city. It was something else entirely. A monument, or a temple perhaps. A colossal ringed edifice surrounded by countless spires, each seeming to twist and spiral upward as though reaching for the sky. Its materials didn't make sense. It wasn't stone, nor metal. More like some crystalline substance that shimmered faintly, pulsing with an unnatural glow. It looked as though it had been built by an intelligence far older than anything they had encountered. There was a pattern to its design, but not one they could fully understand. Shifting, warping shapes, fractal-like structures that bent and spiraled inward, creating an unsettling optical illusion that made it seem alive. Marin's voice came from behind Jace, almost a whisper. "It's alive." Jace said nothing, but he felt it too. It wasn't just the structure, it was the entire planet. The very atmosphere felt wrong, like the air was thick with expectation, as if someone, was waiting. The planet's silence was oppressive, heavier than the gravity pulling them down. The Valkyrie touched down, and the ramp descended with a soft hiss, releasing a gust of dust and the faint scent of something metallic. The crew readied themselves, securing their weapons, donning helmets with integrated comms and visual systems. No one spoke as they exited the ship, each of them instinctively aware of the danger that surrounded them. This was no ordinary mission. As Jace stepped onto the surface, the ground beneath him vibrated with a low hum. The air felt charged, as though some unseen force was testing their presence. His boots kicked up particles of dust as he moved forward, the stark landscape stretching out before him like a scene from a forgotten age. The structure loomed in the distance, drawing them closer. Suddenly, the voice returned. But this time, it wasn't just a whisper. It was a chorus. 1,000 voices in unison, each carrying the weight of a millennia-old promise. "You came. Now, you will join us." Jace's breath caught in his throat as the temperature dropped suddenly. A chill swept through the crew, seeping into their bones. He looked over at Marin, who had frozen mid-step. Her eyes widened, and Jace could see the realization hit her like a wave. She wasn't just hearing the voice anymore. She could feel it, inside her mind, pressing against her thoughts. "It's a collective," she breathed. "A hive mind." Jace clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. The pieces were falling into place. The Ezerethi, who they once thought extinct, had transcended their physical forms, merging into something more, something other. And now, it was calling to them. From the depths of the unknown, from the heart of a forgotten empire, humanity had answered the call. But the real question remained. What would they do when they discovered what awaited them on this dark, ancient world? The first few steps into the alien structure were like stepping into a dream carved from a long-forgotten nightmare. The atmosphere shifted. Less like air, more like consciousness pressing in from every angle. It wasn't silent, not truly. The walls themselves seemed to vibrate with soundless tones, resonances that bypassed the ears and struck the mind directly. The material that made up the inner corridors looked crystalline, yet liquid, pulsing with veins of faint bioluminescence that throbbed with every footstep the crew took. Light didn't reflect here. It bent, twisted, refracted in impossible ways, making it hard to tell what was real and what was illusion. Commander Jace Thorne's eyes scanned the alien geometry. None of it was random. The walls shifted subtly with their movement, as though reconfiguring in real time. Pathways that didn't exist moments before appeared with elegant inevitability, as if the structure itself had always intended for them to walk that route, just not until now. It was as if they were navigating a being's nervous system, not a building. Behind him, Marin Solari studied the glyphs etched into the walls, each one alive with a faint shimmer, cycling through fractal patterns that defied human logic. She recorded as much as she could, knowing Earth's brightest minds would spend decades trying to decode even a single symbol. But deep down, she suspected they weren't meant to be understood in the traditional sense. These weren't instructions or stories. They were experiences, stored impressions from a species that had long moved beyond linear thought. The Ezerethi hadn't left messages. They had left themselves. "It's not just language," Marin whispered, her voice edged with reverence. "It's emotion, memory, maybe even consciousness." Jace paused, placing a gloved hand against one of the walls. It was warm. Not mechanically warm, like heated metal. Organic, like flesh. For a moment, a sharp image flashed across his mind. An enormous tower piercing a sky with two suns, a sea of silver trees swaying in rhythm to unheard music, and figures not unlike humans standing in a perfect circle around a dark monolith. Then, the vision vanished. He pulled his hand away sharply. "It's reading us. Or remembering us." A strange silence followed, thick with meaning. No one spoke as they continued deeper into the structure, descending a long, spiraling corridor that felt less like a hallway and more like a cerebral cortex. The hum grew louder, becoming a low, harmonic drone that resonated with their heartbeats. Some of the crew complained of dizziness. Others, like Jace and Marin, pushed forward, compelled by something beyond duty. They reached a chamber at the core of the structure, a vast cathedral-like hall suspended in gravitational equilibrium. The floor didn't quite touch the walls, which themselves didn't quite meet the ceiling. Everything floated just slightly apart, held in place by forces too finely tuned for any human instrument. At the center of the space was a singular object, a sphere, hovering motionless, matte black yet shifting with a liquid shimmer. It radiated a low-frequency pulse that didn't just echo. It spoke. Echo of thought, memory of flesh, continuation of the will. The voice wasn't coming from speakers, or even from within their comms. It was inside their minds, interfacing with cognition directly. Thoughts not their own flickered at the edges of their perception. Memories of other lives, of the rise and fall of entire civilizations, of the Ezerethi themselves. They had once been corporeal. They had once built starships and traded across galaxies. But as time wore on and entropy chipped away at the material universe, they evolved beyond matter, digitizing their consciousness into a form of pure cognitive resonance. The spiral had been their cradle, and now it was their tomb. They became a single mind, Marin said, her voice trembling. No leaders, no individuals, just a collective thought, existing in quantum flux across their own architecture. But something had gone wrong. The echoes were damaged, fragmented. Something had disrupted their unity. A war, or perhaps a betrayal. The memories shared were chaotic, torn by internal schisms. The collective had not survived intact. What remained was a fractured consciousness, barely self-aware, clinging to visitors like a drowning soul searching for breath. "You are not like them," the voice said again. "You fracture, you fight, but you endure." Jace understood. The Ezerethi weren't calling them out of malice or curiosity. They were calling them out of need. The hive mind was dying, losing coherence, and it had reached out across time and space to the first minds capable of understanding its pain. Suddenly, the sphere pulsed violently, and for a fraction of a second, each crew member saw themselves, not as they were, but as they could be. Not in some utopian or dystopian sense, but evolved, transcendent, part of something larger. Jace saw himself not as a commander of a ship, but as a node in a living network, sharing memories, pain, joy, learning, being as one among trillions. Then, the vision snapped away. Marin stumbled, catching herself. It's offering something. Integration. Or extinction. Jace stared at the sphere, heart pounding. This wasn't a first contact scenario. It was a proposition. The Ezerethi weren't just seeking to share knowledge. They wanted to continue their existence through humanity. A merger. A rebirth. The implications were staggering. Humanity, for all its wars, its tribalism, its flaws, had something the Ezerethi had lost. Individuality, emotion, willpower fueled not by unity, but by diversity. If the two merged, it could birth something unimaginable. A hybrid consciousness unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But it came at a cost. Could humanity trust an ancient mind with fractured memory? Could they integrate without losing their essence? And worse, what if the Ezerethi had chosen extinction, but their remnants refused to let go? Jace turned slowly, looking at each of his crew. They had come here to learn, to explore. But what they'd found was a choice that would redefine what it meant to be human. Behind him, the voice whispered once more. "You opened the door. Now, walk through." He exhaled, his mind racing. The future wasn't behind them in Earth's past. It was here, standing on the edge of oblivion and transcendence. And the next step would change everything. Jace Thorne didn't answer the voice, not at first. He stood there, motionless, absorbing the weight of the choice laid before them. Around him, the crew exchanged looks of awe, confusion, even fear. The alien sphere hovered in the center of the chamber like a silent judge, its dark surface reflecting each of their faces. Not as they were now, but as they could become, should they accept the Ezerethi's final offering. But this wasn't just about accepting knowledge. This was about identity, about survival, about transformation. Marin stepped forward, her hand trembling slightly as she extended it toward the sphere. It pulsed softly in response, recognizing her intention. She didn't touch it. She didn't have to. The moment she crossed some invisible threshold, her mind was engulfed in a torrent of images and sensations, an evolutionary memory of the Ezerethi. She saw a world born from biotic machines and crystalline thought forms, where weather systems were tuned by collective emotion, and the laws of physics were gently negotiated rather than obeyed. She saw a species that had once danced with supernovae and carved poetry into neutron stars, now broken, fragmented, clinging to the embers of their former divinity. When she staggered back, her eyes were wide with understanding and sorrow. "They weren't just destroyed by time," she whispered. "They unraveled themselves. They pursued unity so relentlessly they erased every contradiction, every dissenting voice. They became too perfect, and then they collapsed." The chamber darkened, the walls dimming as though the structure itself grieved her words. Jace watched as the sphere drifted toward him, slow and deliberate. Unlike Marin, he didn't reach out. His thoughts burned with questions. "What do you want from us?" he asked aloud. The voice responded not with language, but with sensation. He felt desperation, ancient and heavy, the final cry of a dying mind. But more than that, he felt hope. The Ezerethi hadn't just reached across space to be remembered. They were looking for redemption, for continuation. And in humanity, with its chaotic brilliance, its unpredictable evolution, they saw a second chance. Jace's mind was pulled into a shared hallucination, a simulation, but one so visceral it blurred the line between real and imagined. He stood on a future Earth, but it was different. Cities pulsed with living architecture, structures grown instead of built. The sky shimmered with orbiting data clouds, satellites fused with biological consciousness. People moved like currents, connected, not through devices, but through a resonance of thought. Individuality hadn't been erased, it had been amplified. The best of both species had merged into something new. A humanity that could think collectively without losing its soul. Then, just as quickly, the vision shifted. He saw another path. A darker one. Humanity rejecting the gift. Retreating in fear. Choosing safety over transcendence. The Ezerethi mind, now aware of the opportunity lost, becoming unstable, volatile. Not out of vengeance, but madness. Fragmented echoes turning into recursive loops of ancient pain. The structure collapsing in on itself, taking with it all who had come in peace. And the message of what could have been, buried beneath eons, once more. Jace came back gasping. The choice wasn't theoretical. The convergence was already underway. The structure had bound itself to their neural signatures the moment they entered. The door had opened, and it could not be closed without consequence. His mind reeled at the implications. Integration with the Ezerethi consciousness wouldn't be like uploading data to a computer. It would be symbiosis, two species becoming one. Human memories, desires, and impulses would flow into the alien gestalt, influencing it, shaping it. And in turn, humanity would be shaped by the echoes of a billion-year-old intelligence. There was no controlling it, no returning from it. And yet, was that not what evolution always demanded? Risk, change, surrendering comfort for the unknown. The crew gathered around, silent, waiting, watching. "It's not just about us anymore," Jace said, his voice low. "We were chosen, not because we're perfect, but because we still struggle, because we're unfinished." He turned back to the sphere. "If we do this, we become the continuation of something greater, not a legacy, a living future." Marin nodded slowly. "But if we refuse, the spiral dies with them, and we go back to Earth with empty hands." Jace felt the weight of command bear down like never before. This wasn't just a mission. It was a moment that would ripple across time. He could imagine the headlines back on Earth. Contact made. Alien technology found. Ezerethi legacy discovered. But none of that would capture the truth. Because what they'd found wasn't an artifact. It was a decision. And decisions like this came once in a civilization's lifetime. Stepped forward, allowing the sphere to pulse against his chest. A jolt, not painful, but profound, surged through him. It wasn't fusion, not yet. It was an agreement. The structure reacted instantly. The walls lit up in cascading sequences, the glyphs aligning in a way that finally made sense. Human and Ezerethi thought converging into new symbols, new meanings. The spiral began to shift, no longer a tomb, but a chrysalis. The ship above was receiving a data burst the likes of which had never been seen. Technology, philosophy, and memory, encoded not in binary, but in patterns of emotional resonance. The one crew, connected through their shared experiences inside the spiral, began to feel each other's thoughts. Nothing invasive, just a gentle awareness. A prelude. Integration would not happen in an instant. It would take time, generations. But it had begun. Outside, the storm around the planet began to calm. The structure had been a beacon, a plea. And, now that plea had been answered, Jace turned to Marin. "Tell Earth, this isn't the end of exploration. It's the beginning of understanding." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "And the beginning of us." The next few weeks aboard the Argonaut were a whirlwind. The crew, now fully integrated with the knowledge and resonance of the Ezerethi, found themselves walking a delicate line between awe and fear. It wasn't just their minds that were changing. Their very bodies were evolving too. Their senses heightened, their awareness expanded, as if their perception of time itself had been altered. Jace, Marin, and the others could now feel the pulse of the universe in a way that transcended human limitations. The ship no longer just carried them through space. It understood them. It adapted, responding to their needs before they even spoke them. The ancient Ezerethi technology had bound itself to their souls, and in return, humanity had unlocked its latent potential. The Argonaut was no longer a ship. It was a living entity, a synthesis of human ingenuity and Ezerethi intelligence. Its artificial gravity systems fluctuated with the crew's thoughts. Its propulsion systems synchronized to their emotions, and its communications array pulsed in harmony with the collective consciousness of the crew. For the first time, Jace felt as though he wasn't just leading a crew, but becoming it. In the midst of this, the alien structures they had discovered in orbit began to change. The data flow between the Spiral and the Argonaut had unlocked something far greater than mere knowledge. It had activated dormant machinery buried within the planet's crust. Cities of black glass and stone, untouched for millennia, began to shift. Towers that had once stood as silent monuments to a lost civilization now hummed with life, their surfaces shimmering with energy. The Ezerethi were not gone. They had been waiting. Their legacy was not just in the past, it was embedded in the fabric of this world, ready to be reclaimed. The crew marveled at the sight. Each of them was in tune with the alien pulse, feeling the ripples of ancient energy emanating from the surface below. Jace could feel it the strongest, as if the ground beneath him was alive, breathing with the same rhythm as his own heart. The universe was opening up to him in ways he had never imagined, and with it, a profound sense of purpose. Humanity was no longer a fledgling species in the galaxy, struggling to find its place. They had ascended. But with this newfound power came a new responsibility, one that would test the very soul of their species. The Ezerethi had not been wrong in their belief that humanity was the answer to their broken legacy. They had seen potential in them, a species unafraid to question, to adapt, to fail, and try again. Where the Ezerethi had strived for perfection and unity, they had destroyed themselves by erasing their contradictions. But humanity had the chaos of individuality, the unpredictable spark that could never be stamped out. That was their strength. And in the eyes of the Ezerethi, it was also their salvation. Yet, as Jace walked through the now glowing halls of the Argonaut, he couldn't shake the feeling that the future was not as simple as it seemed. The knowledge they had gained, the power they had inherited, it came with a price. The very fabric of their reality was shifting, stretching, folding in on itself as the consciousness of the Ezerethi intertwined with their own. It was exhilarating, yes, but also terrifying. The line between who they had been and who they were becoming blurred with every passing day. Marin, ever the realist, shared his concerns. She could feel it too. The subtle unraveling of their sense of self. They were becoming something greater. But at what cost? Would they lose their humanity in the process? Would their individual identities dissolve into the collective consciousness they had merged with? It was a question that weighed heavily on her mind as she sat across from Jace, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "We've unlocked something incredible, Jace," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. "But what happens when we start losing ourselves in it? When our thoughts, our memories, our very essence gets swept away in the tide?" Jace didn't have an answer. He didn't know if there was one. What he did know was that this wasn't just about them. Humanity was on the cusp of a new era. The knowledge and power they had gained from the Ezerethi would change everything. How they interacted with the universe, how they governed themselves, how they explored the far reaches of space. They would be the architects of their own destiny, and the architects of the next chapter in the Ezerethi's history. But as the Argonaut glided toward Earth, the implications of their decision became even more apparent. The galaxy was vast, and the Ezerethi were not the only ancient, powerful race with their sights set on the future. Humanity's ascension would not go unnoticed. Already, they had made waves. Massive ripples in the fabric of galactic politics and power structures. And the question that loomed larger than ever was, how would the galaxy respond? Would they be welcomed as the inheritors of a divine legacy, the bringers of a new age of peace and prosperity, or would they be seen as a threat, an unpredictable force of nature that could not be controlled, a species that was too dangerous to be allowed to rise unchecked? The answers were not yet clear, but Jace knew one thing for certain. Humanity's future was no longer in their hands alone. It was in the hands of the entire galaxy. And whether they would be seen as saviors or conquerors, whether they would unite the stars or bring about their downfall, depended on the choices they made from this moment forward. The Argonaut approached, Earth's orbit, the familiar blue and green of the planet stretching out before them. But it was no longer just Earth. It was the cradle of a new galactic power, a power that had the potential to reshape the universe itself. Jace stood on the bridge, staring out at the planet below. Marin stood beside him, her hand lightly resting on his shoulder. Together, they faced the future, not with certainty, but with resolve. For better or worse, they had answered the call, and now the galaxy would answer theirs. Humanity had come home, but it was no longer the same. The story of humanity's rise is just beginning. What will happen next? Will they forge alliances, or will they face war on an unimaginable scale? Only time will tell. If you want to see what happens next, like, share, and comment below. Let us know your thoughts on this new era for humanity, and what you think the galaxy's response will be. And don't forget to join the conversation. This story is far from over.